looking forward to the kick-off of the Rainbow Cup? Because I know I am.
I am, yeah. I think it's going to be very interesting. It's unfortunate that it can't be a normal Rainbow Cup where the games will also be in South Africa, because all the games are going to be, which is disappointing, because it's not going to be the way it was designed. Part of the Rainbow Cup is also to have the European teams come down here and play here in conditions they're not used to. But I think it will be quite challenging for some of our teams to adapt to the conditions there. It's a lot colder, although we are heading into summer for you guys, which might help a bit. But still, a lot of the countries are cold, they're wet. Also, the style of rugby is going to be quite a bit different.
Yeah, big time. And I suppose now is the time to introduce you. So, welcome, guys. This is my look ahead at the Rainbow Cup, and I have Austin here from Bokmemes, probably one of the most knowledgeable people on South African rugby. Great to have you here, man.
I wouldn't say knowledgeable, but I create a lot of banter around South African rugby. But I wouldn't say I know. I wouldn't call myself a rugby expert.
Oh, you know a good bit.
Enough, I suppose. I know enough.
So we're talking about the Rainbow Cup today, and like, obviously we were just talking about how much we're looking forward to it actually coming. It's a big deal. It's a change to kind of the established leagues, South African teams coming north. It's going to add a lot of bulk and a lot of skill to the PRO14. And kind of one of the questions I've been getting around this cup, why is it happening? But for you, what do you think the South African motivation is to actually, leave Super Rugby and come north to play in the PRO14?
Well, the initial sort of thinking was New Zealand kind of separated themselves from the traditional competition last year, shortly after COVID happened. So it was actually New Zealand that initiated it. They made a statement saying they want to separate and set up, reestablish Super Rugby, but with Australia and maybe some Pacific Island teams, basically teams that are in their time zone. I don't believe they made this decision because they didn't want to play against us, rather just because they found it's quite inconvenient traveling across so many different time zones from Argentina to South Africa. So then obviously there's been talk for a few years of South Africa joining the PRO14. It's been happening for a few years. There's been speculation of it for a few years. And I think it was eventually going to happen where the rest of the teams joined up, but COVID just sped up everything, and it ended up happening sooner.
Yeah, that was kind of my feeling to it as well. I always kind of saw the Cheetahs and Kings as a testing ground to see how South Africa in the PRO14 would go. Obviously, the teams that are coming are much more well established in Super Rugby, so they're going to bring a much higher level of competition. Which, as a PRO14 fan, I'm looking forward to, because you regularly hear about the PRO14 not being as physical as Top 14 or as Premiership, but the South African sides are 100% going to bring that into this competition.
Absolutely, yeah. I think with the Cheetahs and Kings joining, I think they did fairly well. Kings were poor, but they've never really had a lot of money, so it was a unique challenge for them competing against teams with a lot of money. And I think the Cheetahs did quite well, especially considering when they moved to the PRO14 back in, I think it was 2017, 2016, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Cheetahs lost a lot of their players to Super Rugby teams, guys like Willie Leroux, Trevor Nyakane, Louis de Jager. A lot of their star players went to other South African teams because they wanted to be in Super Rugby. So, and that same year, Cheetahs made the quarterfinals. And then, so I think they did really well. But for their circumstances at least. But again, Cheetahs and Kings were always the weaker teams, sort of in recent years in Super Rugby. So I think now that the Bulls and the Sharks are going to compete as well, it will, as you say, bring a lot more competition to the competition.
Yeah, and like even Stormers and Lions, like there's no shortage of talent across those four teams. And like obviously, look, I think we both made our opinions on it clear when it happened. Like we were all gutted for the Cheetahs, you know, but a 16-team league is kind of you're stretching things at that point. So going 17 teams is just it's not really feasible. I think Super Rugby kind of proved that in the fact that they had to make the cuts that they did. But I think the real knock-on effect from Super Rugby was the time zones. You know, as you said, you're pretty much traveling around the world, going from Argentina to South Africa, and you're crossing, I don't know how many time zones at this stage. But you guys are going to be in I think you're an hour ahead of GMT, so, you know, it's pretty much the exact same time zone. Yes, there's still a bit of traveling, but I thought it worked well with Cheetahs and Kings, in that, you know, Cheetahs and Kings did 2 weeks on the road, then they came home for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks on the road. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's going to work pretty well. I think the tournament organisers will run it pretty well.
Yeah, you see, also rugby is very much a business. So I think SARU, the South African Rugby Union, really wanted to get into Europe because that's where the rugby is, and I think the end goal is to eventually get into the Champions Cup as well.
Yeah.
And that seems like it will eventually happen. So there's a lot of financial benefits, I think, because that is where the money is. The money is north. The money isn't south. So I think the teams that will suffer the most from this is actually New Zealand and Australia. I think they're going to suffer quite a bit, and I think they're going to have less competition, and I don't think their revenue will be as good without South Africa. I think their best bet is if they somehow try and get involved in the Japanese rugby market.
Yeah, obviously Sunwolves were part of Super Rugby as well, and they got cut as well did the Jaguars. So, you know, their two teams kind of gone into the wind, and that was the connection to Japan. So unfortunately, that's gone. But you know, there's a lot of Australians and New Zealanders playing in the top league, so hopefully the fan base that the players grow in Japan will transfer back over to Australia and New Zealand for the Super Rugby
Yeah,
leagues.
the Sunwolves was a disaster in many ways because firstly, um, the Sunwolves wasn't a Japanese team. The whole point of having the Sunwolves in Super Rugby was to try and grow the sport there and so on. But what Sunwolves just did was they kept buying players from other Super Rugby teams, and
Yeah,
they ended up having a lot of South Africans in there and a lot of players from all over the world, Fijians as well, Tongans, I think. So it was just a mess. They didn't really show up to the party in terms of what they should have done, the Sunwolves. But I think more I think what could work is if they more blended the current Japanese league with the Super Rugby League, and there were a few Japanese teams, a few Australian teams. I think maybe if they jumbled everything together, like the PRO14, a few teams from every nation, I think that could work.
yeah. Like hopefully they will open up that opportunity in the future. Like we do see, there's the potential of, or they are saying there's two Pacific Island teams going to join Super Rugby from next year. So obviously that's going to bump it up from the 10 teams that are playing now between AU and Aotearoa up to 12. So, you know, there might be the potential to bring in two Japanese teams from there. They're all relatively within the same time zone. So, yes, it's a bit of traveling up to Japan and back down, but that's where I see the growth for the Japanese rugby.
Yeah, and I mean, what else do New Zealand and Australia do? I mean, they're not going to be able to get into Europe because
No.
the time zones are too different, and we already there. There's not going to be space for New Zealand and Australia as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I really think New Zealand and Australia are in a bit of a bad situation. I mean, they are very limited in where they're going to go. And I won't be surprised if South Africa eventually joins the Six Nations as well. I could see that happening.
Yeah,
And if that happens, then I mean, Australia and New Zealand are going to suffer on an international level big time, because
yeah.
they need extensive competition. They can't just keep playing each other the whole time. That's not going to help.
Oh, big time. And like, I suppose like South Africa did sign on to the Rugby Championship till 2030, but these agreements can be changed. Depending
Yeah,
on
they change often.
what the financial situation is. Um, and like when we say New Zealand and Australia could potentially struggle from this, we're not talking in terms of quality of rugby. We're talking in terms of finances and the growth of the game in the region. Like there's definitely
Personally, I
quality
think
players
that
there.
I personally think their performance will struggle as well.
Do you? Okay.
If Yeah, because I mean, the reason why I think South Africa have stayed a strong nation is because our competition's been good. We've had to play New Zealand a few times every year, and I think that's also made them better. They've had to play against us, who's probably been their biggest competition. So I think strong competition definitely does improve performances of teams. So if a team like New Zealand, they're only facing Australia and like maybe Japan and whatever in the rugby championship one day, I think that could affect them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So I guess that kind of leads me into my next question in that cross-border competitions, do you think they work better for rugby rather than South Africa going ahead and having their own domestic league, maybe potentially expanding on the Currie Cup? Is it the quality of the competition that the teams will have to face?
I think it's purely financial reasons.
Yeah,
If we had our own domestic competition, I don't think it would be for us, because to have their own league, their own domestic league, at least they're involved in like the European Champions Cup and so on. So like France, they have their own league, and England, they have their own league, but they are able to face teams from other nations in
yeah,
the Champions Cup and so on. So I think that helps their revenue. I think purely from a financial point of view, it won't work. I think our TV revenues will be a lot lower, and I think I don't think the level of competition is the problem. I think if money wasn't an issue, a purely domestic competition in South Africa could work very well. But
okay,
also so many of our players moving abroad will affect the quality of the competition,
yeah.
and us playing in Europe, which might give us a financial boost. I think that will help us in keeping players as well. So I think it's mainly from a business point of view that this is the best option.
Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, like rugby does need to run like a business to some extent. I know not everyone likes it, but running the game costs money, and you have to generate the revenue to keep players, to build stadiums, to you know get people on the pitch essentially. I think that's one thing that a lot of
Is
people tend to forget.
Absolutely. I think the guys that are in charge of like the rugby unions, for example, Rassie Rasmussen being rugby, I think a business job, and it's just about administration and the in terms of performance and controlling performance, that's only a portion of it.
Yeah. Yeah, like listen, like from my perspective, you guys coming up to join our league, yes, it's going to boost revenue, but I think it's just going to make the Pro 14 a much stronger domestic league, and I'm really excited about it. And like we can get into the topic of the format of the cup now because we know it's changed than what was initially announced. Nobody's traveling to South Africa with the pandemic and stuff going on. Obviously, player safety has to be number one priority, so we can kind of understand that. But it must have been disappointing for you guys to hear that. Even though there's no fans in stadiums,
Yeah,
it must have been disappointing to see, potentially the Sharks playing Leinster in South Africa not actually happening.
yeah, it's disappointing in terms of we'll be at a disadvantage because it will make it a little bit more difficult. We've already got a lot of things stacked against us, like the teams we're playing against taking our players
Yeah,
and being at a financial disadvantage, and it being our first year in the competition, so we're the newbies, so we have to adapt. So it definitely puts the odds against us, but at the same time, I feel like that's often where we perform best. South Africa often do the best when the odds are stacked against them, and we've often had that where things are against us, but we've managed to turn it around. I
yeah.
think also your point making the Pro 14 more entertaining and a better quality of rugby. Yeah, from what I've heard, it sounds like a lot of people see the Pro 14 as not the most exciting competition, not the best quality. So I mean, yeah, I think this will definitely help and make it more entertaining and more significant in the rugby world.
Oh, most definitely. Like, if you talk to people who wouldn't be necessarily Pro 14 fans, so maybe Premiership or Top 14 fans, they wouldn't view the Pro 14 the same way as they view their own domestic leagues, in terms of physicality and skill levels. And for a lot of Pro 14 teams, the focus is more on Europe than winning the Pro 14 because it's seen as the more prestigious tournament. But with the South African teams coming up north now, Leinster, Munster, Glasgow, they're all going to have to field their best teams to play these South African sides because they're just going to be too good otherwise. You know, obviously the Curry Cup and Super Rugby Unlocked didn't have the best TV coverage globally, but from what it's a really good standard of rugby that you guys are bringing up here, and I know it was a slow progression because obviously you guys had only got back to playing, so it didn't start off with its best quality, but it has built up over time, and you're seeing the South African sides playing really good rugby now, and they're going to be coming into this tournament really, really fresh and ready to go.
Yeah, the preparation series was excellent. The preparation series was like a few weeks of warm-up games after the Curry Cup, and it was really excellent. You see, during the Curry Cup last year, going a bit of a rut of they got stuck in a bit of a rut of how to play because a lot of the players were unfit after lockdown. They didn't have a lot of time to prepare. They had a long
Yeah,
break, much longer break in comparison to many of the other nations. So there were a lot of obstacles, but I think we have a lot of young talent, which is great. So in the last episode of the podcast I do with a friend of mine, we spoke about a possible rule they should introduce into the Rainbow Cup because, or you see, when we were in Super Rugby, the playing fields were a little bit more even because we would lose a lot of players to Europe, but New Zealand and Australia were kind of in the same boat. They were also losing players, not as many as us, but the big thing was we weren't playing against the teams that were taking our players.
yeah,
So it wasn't New Zealand and Australian teams that were taking South Africans. But now the problem is when we play against so many of the Pro 14 teams, there's going to be a lot of those guys in there who used to play for South African Super Rugby teams. So I think there's quite a big disadvantage now. And in the competition, it's just going to become about which team has the most money. And a lot of our youngsters could perform very well in the Rainbow Cup, and then we lose them after a season to your teams
yeah,
because you guys have more money. So I think the guys in charge of the Rainbow Cup, they should introduce limitations. So I think there should be some sort of rule where you're three foreign-born players in starting lineup in every game, including the bench, something like that, just to monitor this because Otherwise, there's just going to be a huge imbalance in the competition, and I think it's going to be quite unfair for our teams.
Yeah, I get what you're. Yeah, I do get what you're saying, and it's a very, very good point. I know from an Irish perspective, we call them NIQ players or non-Irish qualified players. Um, every team except for Connacht, because Connacht has a little bit of leeway because they're a bit further behind in our other provinces, are allowed. The
Yeah.
way it works is there's only an allowance for one foreign-born player per position across the three provinces. So if say if Ulster brought in an out half from New Zealand, that means Leinster or Munster are not allowed to bring in a foreign-born player for at out half. So
That's a cool rule.
Ireland do try to limit it, and then when you get into actually playing for in the European competition, you're only allowed two non-national players per squad. So your entire 28-man squad, you're only allowed two non-national players. So teams are limited by that, but then when you get back to looking at the Pro 14, that limitation isn't there. It's depending on what each country brings in. I
It
suppose
should
like
it should be a it should be a competition rule, because
yeah,
it's nice that Ireland are doing it, but I mean Scotland, Edinburgh, and Glasgow, there's so many Africans in there, and the Italian teams as well are starting to get a lot of South Africans, and the Welsh teams. Okay, yeah, the Welsh teams do have quite a few South Africans as well, so it should be a competition-wide rule, and that's what I would love to see.
yeah, like I think we've talked a bit about it briefly before. I know sometimes sometimes some of the teams struggle in terms of actual playing numbers that are available to squads. Um, like if you look at Ireland, we have 100,000 senior players, but we might actually only have 200 players that are capable of playing at Pro 14 level. So there is quite a limitation in numbers there. But I do agree there should be some kind of cap on how many, especially for playing against South Africa. There should be some sort of cap there. Say, look, okay, you guys can bring in some players, but and then like if a player has moved here and is living here for the rest of his life and is going to finish out his playing career in the country and ends up getting capped for that country, like we'll say CJ Stander, he shouldn't count against that. He should be counted as an Irish player and not counted against the quota.
Yeah, but I also think there should be a limitation on an international level as well of how many um, players you're allowed to adopt with the residency rule. Because for many years it was you only had to play for 3 years,
Yeah,
and then you can play for the national team. And even though it's 5 years now, we still feeling the effects of the 3-year rule. And years in a
yeah,
rugby is very short. It's 5 years is a little bit better, but I think there should be a rule on an international level of how many players can qualify for the national team with the residency rule. Like for Scotland, for example, it's just becoming more and more and more. They've got a lot of players in the extended squad that have
yeah,
qualified with the residency rule. So I would love to see maybe you're only allowed three guys in the squad with the residency rule, something like that. But also, um, I understand your guys' depth issue, and it's nice for our players that they get to get opportunities abroad. It's nice for them as individuals, but also you guys will never develop the depth if you don't start investing in your youth more. I think I think a lot of the European teams, their immediate reaction when they lose a big player is to get another player from that country. So like when CJ Stander left, the immediate reaction was let's get another South African, and they tried to get Pieter-Steph du Toit. And if they got Pieter-Steph
yeah,
du Toit, it would have been so weird for like the Stormers playing against Munster, and then Pieter-Steph du Toit, who's like a Stormers legend, playing against Stormers. as I said, it's nice for the individuals, but we have to also think about the sport as a whole and maintaining the authenticity and also making it fair. If we're going to be joining this competition, the playing fields do need to be evened out a little bit.
Yeah, like I'm told, like for me, the youth game should be always the number one priority for any club. Is developing the rugby is all about grassroots. You know, you need
Mm,
a really good grassroots system, a really good school system, to bring forward the players to play for your provincials, your clubs, what you know.
mm,
And I think you look at the likes of Leinster, where it's pretty much an entirely Irish squad. I know you have the likes of James Lowe and Jameson Gibson Park, who were brought in from New Zealand, and like they were brought in as project players to get cap for Ireland, to kind of fill in a shortfall. But you can kind of see now that even though they were brought in cap for Ireland, that they're kind of going down the pecking order a little bit, because when they were brought in, there was a shortfall, but that shortfall doesn't exist anymore. And from an Irish coaching perspective, they've always said, you know, we're going to pick the Irish guys first, and then if we need to, we'll go to the next one. And if you look at Ulster,
yeah,
Ulster used to be kind of the same. They used to buy in a lot of South Africans. They used to bring in a lot of players from across the globe, and they swapped it and they started investing way more money in their youth system, and they have just the quality of players that they have coming through at the minute is brilliant.
mm,
And for me, I would nearly say that Ulster is probably nearly the second best team in Ireland right now. Even though Munster were in the Pro 14 final,
yeah.
I would think Ulster's probably the second best team in Ireland, and probably the Pro 14.
Mm. I personally think like what you say makes a lot of sense, and I think Ireland. Um, it sounds like they have the right intentions,
Yeah.
and they are trying to empower their Irish youth. But I also think a lot of European haven't done European rugby teams haven't done enough to invest in their grassroots rugby. Like um, Scotland, for example, how much have they actually invested into their grassroots rugby? You know, a lot of people say their population size is small and so on, but you know, they also need to invest into their youth, and they also need to to give more opportunities for their youth. Because here in South Africa, we have excellent grassroots systems, which is why
Yeah.
we have so much depth. We have schoolboy rugby, which is huge here, and probably even bigger is Varsity Cup, university rugby, which is amazing in developing players. So a lot of the nations need to, especially emerging nations, teams that are still emerging, like Italy, Argentina, Japan, even. I think if they invest more into their grassroots system, that will do a lot in growing the game internationally, getting more players playing worldwide, and improving those teams.
Oh, big time. Like that is it. It's all about the grassroots, you know, and
Mm,
bringing kids from a young age into the sport and developing, like as you said, schoolboy rugby is massive in South Africa. It's massive in New Zealand. College rugby is massive in South Africa. It's big in New Zealand. Schoolboy rugby is starting to become big in Ireland. But like South Africa and New Zealand are two of the top two teams, or they're always in the top five, you know. And there's a reason why they're always in the top
mm.
five, is because they're developing the talent from a very, very young age. And like,
Yes, yeah, and
and I
sorry.
don't know if it's an issue when it comes to kind of privatization of rugby teams, like we would see in the Premiership and Top 14, where revenue comes before everything. Like we see a lot of anyone who plays in the top 14 on the what's supposed to be their break week from the Six Nations, because the Six Nations was 2 weeks off, 1 week off. and then 2 more weeks, to allow players to recover and fix up any. Then players have to fly back to France and play in the top 14 most of the time. And it takes a lot out of the players and player welfare. So, and that's where we kind of see some of the profits come before player welfare and development of the sport. And is there an issue around privatization of clubs? Should it be the unions that are running the clubs more so than people coming in and buying them?
Yeah, I'm also, the biggest team that actually suffers from players going abroad is the Pacific Isles, like Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga. I mean,
Yeah.
if they were able to keep all their players, they would be amazing. So good. So yeah, like how I wonder how well are Southern Hemisphere interests represented in World Rugby. Um, it feels like to me, it feels like a lot of the regulations and so on benefit the Northern Hemisphere in many ways. And is that a case of is that a case of the Southern Hemisphere not having a big enough voice in World Rugby? I don't know. I don't really have the answers to that, but
Yeah.
it's something maybe to think about.
That one, yeah, is definitely. I definitely don't have the answers to that one either.
Mm.
But yeah, like again, like it needs to come. Like the unions themselves need to redirect the focus. Like England didn't have a great Six Nations this year. Now, whether it's the coaching or the player selection, but you know, you had players like Joe Simmons, Sam Simmons, who were left sitting for players like Billy Vinipola and Owen Farrell, who aren't playing regular rugby. You know,
Yeah.
um, and realistically, in an international squad, they were just going off of past laurels. So, like, how were they getting selected over the informed players? Um,
There was a
Again,
lot of controversy around player selection in the English squad,
yeah,
big
yeah.
time.
So, again, is it the fact that Eddie was saying, okay, well, these some of these players it's their last shot at the Lions tour, or is he getting pressure from the clubs to say, these are big guys, we want to see them on an international jersey, so it brings in more money for the clubs. I don't know. But I don't think privatization of teams helps the game massively. I think when it's union ran, there's a more of a focus on developing the system, more so than the club brand name.
Well, it's helped. I think it's helped our teams in some ways. Like Sharks have gone private
Yeah,
and Bulls have gone private. And immediately both of those teams have a lot more money and we're able to keep a lot of our players now for
yeah,
those unions. And they've been able to buy a lot of big names. Like Bulls have bought Johan Goosen is going back, who I don't know if you remember him, he used to play for the Springboks.
yeah,
Um, he's going back there. Marcel Coetzee from Ulster,
yep,
he's going back to the Bulls. So they've been able to get a lot of big names, which is awesome. So I agree with you. There
yeah.
are a lot of iffy things about it, but I mean, if it's going to help the teams perform better and have more spending money, I mean, I'm all for that.
But it's as long as the development there's like you don't want it to affect your youth system because South Africa has a quality
Yes,
youth system. You don't want it to have say Bulls aren't investing in their youth teams anymore because all the money goes into the senior squad and keeping big name players.
true. No, that's a good point. Like we maybe we could end up as a team like Edinburgh one day who just buy like a lot of
Yeah,
guys nearing retirement, so that could happen.
and like
I
Edinburgh don't
suppose.
have a whole lot of money either.
Yeah, you see, also the currency difference makes
Yes.
a big is
Yeah.
a big impact because the South African rand is quite weak. So if the pounds make a big difference, but yeah, like I suppose some of the decisions by the Bulls maybe were a little bit questionable. Some might see it as questionable, like bringing Mornay Steyn back. He was quite old when he's still quite old for a rugby player, I suppose, but you know. I think it was a good decision. I'm all for it. I think him coming back to the Bulls has been great, but some might look at it and say, yeah, but he's taken an opportunity from a younger player. But we losing so much experience abroad that we sometimes need it. But again, like there's been a lot of golden oldies being bought at the Bulls, like Gio Aplon as well. He's like close to 40 now, and he was the starting fullback before he got injured. And um, they wanted Francois Hoogaard back as well, who is in his, I think he's around 33 now. But now that the Bulls couldn't get him back, they've hired Zach Berger, who's a young scrum half prodigy. So
Yeah.
that's really cool. So he could easily be a Springbok scrum half one day, Zach Berger, because he's young, he's got a lot of talent. So I think it's all about balance with everything. I mean, I'm not against players going abroad. I completely understand it, and I think if a team like Munster and Ireland can use foreign-born players in a positive way, I think it can do a lot of
Yeah.
good. And I think it's really nice for the individuals, as I say. But there needs to be a balance. That's what I'm trying to say. There needs to be a balance, and the scale can't tip, and it can't become ridiculous in terms of how many foreign-born players are in these teams. So I just think there needs to be regulations just to
Yeah.
make sure that it doesn't become ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't think any of us want to, like, if Munster, Leinster, Ulster all become just or Scottish teams or Welsh teams become all foreign-born players, then it's going to affect the international teams, because who's going to fill the international squad? So, like, yeah, there needs to be that checks and balances to make sure that we're not overfilling teams. And, like, yes, if a country if a team has a genuine need that they need to fill a slot, like out half, there is no quality out half available to you right now, so you buy in someone from South Africa or New Zealand to fill a slot for 2 years, then that's cool, but it can't be permanent solutions. It can only be gap fillers.
Yeah, it's what's that going to do to help your system? It's
Yeah,
it's like it's just putting a band-aid on the problem. It's
exactly.
it's not healing the problem. It's just a
Yeah.
short-term solution.
So, like, you bring in a foreign-born player for 2 years, someone with experience, and the young guys who are coming through your system can learn off him, and eventually in 2 years, maybe 3 years, depending on how long it takes them to come through the system, then they take over from him. And that's kind of the way I like to see it worked. Like, I know with CJ Stander's retirement, there's a lot of young guys coming in, and Munster have brought in, what's his name? It's Jason, isn't it?
Yes, Jason Jenkins.
Jason Jenkins, thank you. Munster have brought him in now, but they have some quality fullbacks in back rows and second rows, and the decision kind of confused me a little bit. And I know people will say players will be injured, people in international duty. It's I don't know, that decision
I have to
confused me.
agree. I I think it was a stupid decision. I
Yeah,
think it's only hurting you guys. I mean, rather because now you guys don't have CJ Stander anymore on an international level either.
no,
You know, Jason Jenkins is capped for the Springboks, so he won't play for Ireland.
no.
Rather try and create a new CJ Stander.
And it,
Maybe Jason Jenkins is just there to maybe he'll play kind of a mentorship role and he'll just be there for backup. Maybe they will give some youngsters a chance in Ireland, but maybe they just want a guy like Jason Jenkins to be there in case.
I really hope so. I really hope that they're kind of just saying, okay, let's get him in. We'll pay him a few quid, and he'll kind of be our injury international cover. Which, if that's how it works, cool. But, like, you have Wycherley, Jack O'Donoghue, Coombs, who've all come through in the last 2-3 years, and who are all fantastic players who can fill second row and back row slots in place of CJ. So
I've got a very random question off topic, but behind you, You've got your jerseys there, right? I see
Yes,
there's a gap next. I see there's a gap next to the Lions jersey. Are you planning on putting a Springbok jersey there?
it's. I would love to. It's a very tight spot, but I might move things across a little bit and fill something in there because I have the Lions jersey for this tour, and I'd love to have it up with the Springbok jersey as well because above the Lions one up here, I have the New Zealand one from the 2017 tour. So they're kind of like the matching set. So I want to get the matching set of Springboks and Lions.
It it feels this might be a little bit of a biased opinion because I'm South African, but you must maybe tell me as a Lions supporter, you would probably be able to give a better uh, point of view. But to me, it kind of feels like the South African, British, and Irish Lions tour is the bigger three in comparison to Australia and New
Uh,
Zealand. It just seems like there's the most history almost. But you tell me from your perspective, because as I say, mine's probably a bit biased.
I think the Lions tour in itself is just something special. You know, it is the pinnacle for a lot of players. You know, because it's once every 4 years, and
Hmm,
you have to be not only the best in your country, but you have to be the best in four countries to be selected to wear the jersey. You know,
exactly.
um, just as a Lions fan, wherever the Lions go, it's massively special. It's really enjoyable, and it's always a big deal. Like some of the Lions media coverage started a year ago, almost. You know, so it'll be nearly running 2 years before we actually even get to the
Exactly.
tour. But
It's
yeah,
awesome. I'm so happy it's going ahead.
oh, so am I, and I hope there's no roadblocks to it now, and that everything goes smooth. I would love if they allow fans, so that I can actually go to it.
Uh,
But we'll have to wait and see.
Depends on what the government.
Yeah, there's going to be so many. Like it's going to. I think it's going to depend on the home nations governments as well. Um, you know, if people go abroad and they come back, are they going to have to quarantine? Are they going to face any issues coming back? So hopefully
Mm,
not. Hopefully not. It'll be straightforward. Yes, people can go, and you know you get your 5,000 Lions fans who flock to South Africa for over 4 weeks, which would just be phenomenal. And the atmosphere will be
would
unbelievable.
be amazing.
I'm really hoping, looking forward to it. But even if we just have to watch it on TV, listen, it's still a Lions tour,
Better
and
than nothing.
yeah, these like all the players on both sides. It happens once every 4 years. A lot of them are never going to play in another Lions tour. They're going to be giving it everything for it, you know. Yeah, so we'll kind of come back to the format of the Rainbow Cup. So it has obviously changed from our initial expectations of two pools. Everyone in the pool plays each other, and the top team from each pool goes into a final. And now we just have a full table. There's going to be 6 games, then the final. And top two teams in the table will go into the final. Um, the scheduling has also
Six
changed.
games for each team, eh?
6 games for each team, yeah.
So you're not going to be facing everyone in the pool. You're only going
No.
to be.
So the
Yeah,
way we
that's a bit strange.
yeah, I think just with what the restrictions are at the minute, I think it was just too
Hmm,
much for everyone to be able to play, and plus it's already been quite a long season. You know, it started back in August. Player fatigue. There's still a Lions
I
tour and summer
understand.
tours to happen. But the way it's going to work is the first round is going to be
Understand
all.
why? I understand. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say the first
First
round
round's
is
going to be.
all derby games. In that, so all the
Yes.
South African teams will face each other, Irish teams, Welsh teams, and the Scottish teams will play each other plus the Italian sides. And
Hmm,
then we don't know how the following three rounds are going to work just yet, but that's when the South African teams are going to travel to Europe, and we'll start facing the European sides. So that's obviously the part that
Hey,
everyone's looking forward to now.
They don't have the specific fixtures yet, hey,
No, not
after
for
the Derby games.
no, not for rounds 4, 5, and 6. So we're still waiting for them. So I don't know how it's gonna work. In like no South African, like
That's
it could get to a case where South African sides don't even play Italian teams or something like that, which would be kind of
exactly.
weird.
So, okay, wait. So let's take a team like Bulls, right? So they've got 6 games the Bulls will be playing. Am I right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so the first 2 will be against South African teams.
First 3.
So then the first 3 against South African
Yeah,
teams. So they will only be playing 3 European teams.
correct. Yeah,
So then it's completely just luck of the draw. Like, shame, someone like Lions could be linked with like freaking Leinster in the first round,
yeah,
after the Derby games. That's interesting. I mean, again, I understand why they've made the competition short. And I think it's quite nice that the competition's so short because Super Rugby was so long and went on forever. So I know this is kind of just a trial run and it'll be nice that it's shorter. So I understand why they're doing it. But it is obviously some teams are going to have a bit easier route than other teams, but I'm also wondering what happens then. Does it go to a semi-final and then a final? What?
it's a straight final. So whoever's first and second will go straight into the final.
That's again, I understand why they do it, but it's not. It won't feel like a very authentic tournament then because it will be largely dependent on the draw, which
Yeah,
teams you get.
and I think that's why they've named it the way they have and called it the Rainbow Cup rather than Pro 16, because it's a unique thing on its own, and come next August, September, I think that's when we'll see the full Pro 16 season come into it. Um, I think this is just, as you said, it's a little taster to what's to come. And
Yeah, I think I quite like it. I like that it's short and simple. Like
yeah,
it's just to warm everyone up to
yeah,
the real thing that's going to happen next year. So it's just going to give just a few games to get used to the conditions
yeah.
for us, and it's cool. I like it. It's
So
and then obviously with the Pro 16, will that go back to? Do you think that will go back to the old format of 2 groups?
that's kind of my expectation. Obviously, nothing's been officially announced about the Pro 16 yet, and I don't really expect it to happen until the Rainbow Cup is finished. So end of June, early July is kind of when I expect the official announcement for the Pro 16. But I would see it be 2 groups of 8 teams. Everyone in the group plays each other twice, and you might play the other team in the other group once. And I think that gets you up to in and around 22 games.
Okay, so
And
you will play everyone in your group twice,
yeah,
and then maybe you'll play everyone in the other
group once.
ones.
And then what you might do is, so there'll be 2 South African teams in the opposite group. You'll probably play your derby games twice. So that's how they ran the Pro 14 as it was. So
Do you not think a round robin could work better? Just one. That's how they used to do Super Rugby. That everyone would be in one group. Everyone would play the other teams once, and then the top 4 would go to a semi-final and then a final. Do you not think that could work better?
that could happen. Um, I have a feeling they might keep the format similar to the Pro 14, but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay.
It's a kind of a tried and tested format. It worked with having South African sides there already, so just, I don't know. I don't see them changing it that much.
No, I understand. You see also like that also is a little bit of luck of the draw, I suppose, because there's 2 groups, and obviously, if you're in a group with Leinster, you're at a disadvantage
Yeah,
immediately because you'll have to play them twice. So I know with Super Rugby, the format was even more like it was bad. So it was like 3 different groups, but then of each country. But then in our group, we got the Jaguars in our group. The 4 South African teams, and then the Jaguars,
Yeah.
and then Australia got Sunwolves in their group. So I mean, Jaguars were so good because it's like their national team, and we had to compete for a spot in the quarterfinals with the Jaguars. But then the Australian teams, Sunwolves is a given win. So
Yeah.
like that was a stupid format as well. Well, no, I don't think the Rainbow Cup or the Pro 14 format is bad. I mean, it's better than the Super Rugby one. But if I had to choose, I would like to see a round robin one. But either is okay.
Yeah, well, I just think like the Derby games are a pretty big thing in the Pro 14. So, Leinster playing Munster away, and then so playing them in Thomond Park, and then playing them in the Avida, are big deals. They're big games, and for a Leinster or Munster fan, they're probably the 2 biggest games of the season in the Pro 14. And I don't think fans would be overly happy to lose those Derby games. So they're going. I have a feeling they'll work a way around it to keep them in whatever format they go for the future Pro 16. They'll try and keep them in it.
Yeah,
It's kind of my expectation.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I think it's going to be cool. It's a nice change.
Yeah. So, how do you think the South African sides are going to perform in the Rainbow Cup? We'll just focus on the Rainbow Cup.
Yeah, let's not speak about long term because but this specific Rainbow Cup, consider that the teams like the Sharks and Bulls have been able to keep most of their players. I think they're going to do well. So I would actually go as far as to say again, it depends on the draw, big time. It hugely depends on the draw, but I'm gonna make a bold prediction and say the whole thing's going to be between Leinster and the Blue Bulls.
That's kind of my thing, because with the Derby games, Bulls have been pretty dominant now in the last 3 tournaments in South Africa. I kind of see them winning their three Derby games, and I think that's going to give them a massive advantage going ahead into future games. And I see quite the same. Like Leinster have only lost 3 games or 4 games in the last 2 years, so I see them doing pretty well. So Blue Bulls and Leinster will kind of be my finalists. And between those two, who do you
Yeah,
think will take it?
I'm South African. I have to be biased. Bulls are going to win it, but I want to ask you the same thing. But just before I do that, I also just want to say that I think Sharks are also a bit of a dark horse. They've been coming up big time.
Oh yeah,
Been
yeah.
improving a lot very quickly.
Oh, big time. Like,
Surprised. I think the Lions and I think the Lions might actually surprise us a bit as well. I think they're seen as big underdogs, but I think they might surprise us. But overall, I'd say Bulls and Sharks are going to do the best. But tell me, who do you think between Leinster and Blue Bulls will win?
I think it's going to be good. Something tells me if with the final, it'll be likely in the RDS, but no fans. I think that's just going to be that far from home. It'll be just too much for the Bulls to get over, and I think Leinster would. It's going to be a close game, and could be decided by the bounce of a ball. But I just think Leinster in Ireland might be just a little bit too much.
Yeah, I think Leinster are definitely the favourites, but I thinking of the guys we have in the Bulls like Dwayne Vermeulen, and there's going to be Will Marcel could see be there by then. I hope. I
I
think he might be.
think my understanding is that he's finishing out the season with Ulster. Was my
Oh
was
damn.
was my understanding.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, I'm going to stick to the Bulls. Just So I'm patriotic, but I won't deny that Leinster are the favourites.
Like
And
as I said, man, it did that game.
they're going
If
to
it,
be the team to beat.
yeah, like it's going to come down to a bounce of a ball. I think, one lucky bounce for one team, and that could be that will be the difference between it. It will be a one-score game.
Possibly.
Whatever it is, it's going to be a one-score game.
Yeah, I mean, we've never seen Leinster take on Bulls like this, so it's going to be really interesting. It's like putting two teams together and let's see what happens. It's going to be really interesting.
Though the funny thing is, they could play each other in the first 6 rounds, and then neither of them get to the final. So
Imagine, yeah, with this format, I mean, we could see like Lions and an Italian team in there. Who knows? Imagine.
no. Yeah, both the Italian sides, I think, were pretty much bottom of their pools in the Pro 14, so I don't see it being too much different, unfortunately. Though Benetton might do a bit better because pretty much the entire Benetton team is the Italian team, so most of their players are gone the entire season. So
True.
Benetton might do a little bit better than what they did in the Pro 14.
Let's hope Italy actually perform for once.
Yes,
in some way.
Like Benetton were in the Pro 14 semi-final 2 years ago. Like they had a really good season, so the potential is there. I don't like putting the Italian teams down all the time.
It would be interesting to see like a second division Pro 14, like with teams from Georgia, and you could even slot in the South African teams that didn't make it in, like Kings and Cheetahs. That could be quite interesting.
Yeah, like you could nearly say you could have your 12 main teams. You could, your 12 top teams play in the Pro 12, and then maybe 10 teams in a Division 2.
And you do like a promotion relegation thing.
Yeah.
That could be quite cool.
Yeah, but deciding who plays in which one will make a lot of fans upset.
Well, they should maybe do like a season of Pro 16. The teams that perform the worst, you put them there. But I mean,
yeah, you could.
It will make it interesting because even if you get dropped to the second league, just be good enough the next season and you'll get promoted. But again, there will be a lot of complications, like players leaving if they go to the lower league. Unfortunately, it's not like football. Like it works in football, like in the English Premier League, you've got the Premier League and the Championship, and for that it works well, just because they've got so much money and they can keep the players. But like if a team like Lions get demoted to the second league of the Pro 16, all the players will leave and it'll just be a mess. And so it might actually not work.
I like it's the same issue kind of around promotion and relegation, the Six Nations. If England was to be dropped out of the Six Nations, that's going to destroy the RFU because it just wouldn't have the finances.
Well, look at Saracens. What's happened with them? That's been a mess.
Though I was looking at their team sheet for the weekend, and they have like 4 or 5 internationals playing against one of the championship teams. So if they don't win this one, yeah. But cool, man. Listen, thank you so much for coming on for the chat. Really
thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me, Corey. It's been awesome. Always nice chatting to you. Hopefully we can do it again in the near future.
Definitely. Maybe we can do a roundup of the Pro 16 or about the Rainbow Cup or something like that at the end or something halfway through. We can catch up again.
That'd be awesome.